You can wait outside. The words hung in the conference hall as everyone turned to stare at me. My fingers tightened around my presentation folder, the one containing 6 months of research that had saved the company millions. "Excuse me?" I managed, my voice barely audible over the clinking of champagne glasses. Renata, our marketing director, gestured dismissively. "We're at capacity for the ceremony. You understand." I glanced around the spacious room. Every colleague from my department sat comfortably at tables draped in cream linen. Even Ren, the intern who'd been with us for exactly 3 weeks, the same intern who'd somehow presented my supply chain algorithm as her own during last month's board meeting. "Why would we waste a seat on you?" Renata added with a thin smile. "You're just an analyst." That moment crystallized everything: the missed promotions, the stolen ideas, the endless hours. My gaze shifted to the projection screen announcing the Innovation Excellence Award that should have had my name on it. "I see," I said, calmly opening my laptop. "Check your email." Moments later, as notification sounds echoed through the hall, I walked out, closing the door on their suddenly panicked voices. Before I continue with what happened next, could you take a moment to imagine standing in those shoes? That feeling when years of your work is dismissed while someone else gets the credit? If you've ever been underestimated or overlooked, you'll understand why what I did next changed everything. Stay with me, because this revenge was 3 years in the making, and the ending will show you exactly why patience is more than a virtue. It's a weapon. My name is Brielle Novak, and until that day, I was the senior data analyst at one of the country's fastest-growing logistics companies. I have an eidetic memory and a talent for finding patterns in chaos, skills that made me exceptional at my job but terrible at office politics. I'm the person who speaks directly and works late, who thinks solving problems matters more than who gets credit for solving them. I was wrong. I grew up in a small town where my father ran the local library and my mother taught mathematics. They raised me to believe that merit would always rise to the top, another thing they were wrong about. When I joined the company after completing my dual master's degrees, I believed I'd found my perfect match, a place where innovation and efficiency were supposedly valued above all else. My first year went exactly as I'd hoped. I created an inventory tracking system that reduced errors by 37%. I developed predictive models that helped our clients optimize their shipping routes. I even discovered a critical flaw in our flagship software that could have cost us our biggest client. Each time, I presented my findings through proper channels, following company protocol to the letter. The trouble began during my second year, when Dominic was hired as our new department head. He arrived with a reputation for turning struggling divisions into success stories. What nobody mentioned was his method, taking credit for his team's achievements while deflecting responsibility for failures. The first time it happened, I thought it was a misunderstanding. I'd developed an algorithm that predicted shipping delays based on weather patterns and port congestion. After presenting it to Dominic in a private meeting, I was surprised to find him showcasing it to executive leadership 2 weeks later, with no mention of my contribution. "Great work on the predictive model," I said afterward, thinking perhaps he'd simply forgotten to credit me. Dominic gave me a blank stare. "The conceptual framework was mine. You just helped with some numbers." I was stunned into silence. The entire framework, from conception to execution, had been mine. But as a still new employee, eager to prove myself as a team player, I let it go. That was my first mistake. Over the next several months, a pattern emerged. I would identify a problem, develop a solution, share it with Dominic, and watch as he presented it as his own insight. When I finally gathered the courage to address it with Eliana in Human Resources, her response left me cold. "Do you have documentation that these were exclusively your ideas?" she asked, not looking up from her computer. "I have the original files with my creation dates," I replied. "But did you develop these during work hours using company resources?" "Well, yes, but..." "Then they belong to the company, not to you personally. Dominic is your supervisor. If he presents departmental achievements to leadership, that's appropriate chain of command." I left her office understanding the unwritten rules. Ideas flowed upward, credit rarely flowed down. I might have continued in this frustrating but tolerable situation if not for what happened 6 months ago. After noticing inefficiencies in our cross-continental shipping routes, I spent weekends developing a comprehensive solution, a new logistics framework that would revolutionize our entire approach. The potential savings for our clients were enormous: 27% reduction in costs, 42% improvement in delivery times. I prepared a detailed presentation, practicing late into the night before the quarterly strategy meeting. But when I arrived, Dominic intercepted me at the door. "Leadership has a tight agenda today. We need to streamline," he said. "Give me your materials. I'll incorporate the key points into my overview." Reluctantly, I handed over my presentation folder. I sat through the 3-hour meeting, waiting for my portion, only to watch Dominic rush through a 2-minute summary that missed all the crucial innovations. The initiative was shelved for further review. 2 weeks later, Ren joined our team as an intern. Ivy League educated and the niece of our company's CEO, she was immediately included in meetings I had been excluded from. 3 weeks after that, she presented her new logistics framework to the executive team, my framework, with superficial changes and a new name. The initiative was immediately greenlit. Ren received a permanent position and became the rising star of our department. When I approached Dominic, his response was brutal in its casualness. "Ren's approach incorporated senior leadership priorities that your version lacked. This is business, Brielle. Results matter more than who came up with what first." That night, I sat in my apartment surrounded by 3 years of work, innovations that had made millions for the company while my salary remained stagnant and my career stalled. Something shifted inside me. If results mattered more than people, I would show them exactly what that philosophy would cost them. I began working on a new project, one I never mentioned at the office, never accessed on company devices, and never developed during business hours. I enhanced my original logistics framework, identifying weaknesses and incorporating solutions that would make the version they'd stolen look primitive by comparison. But this was just the beginning. I started cataloging every instance where my work had been appropriated, creating a detailed record with timestamps, original files, and witness accounts from colleagues who had seen the pattern but remained silent. I scheduled coffee meetings with former employees who had left under similar circumstances, gathering perspectives and building connections. I discovered I wasn't alone. Tamsin from product development had left after her patent-worthy innovation was claimed by her manager. Leo from client relations resigned when his strategy for retaining our largest account was presented by the VP without attribution. Each conversation revealed a company culture that systematically exploited its most innovative employees while rewarding those who excelled at internal politics. More importantly, these conversations built me a network of talented, undervalued professionals who recognized the same toxic patterns. People who, like me, had continued creating and innovating despite the lack of recognition, because that's who we fundamentally were. 3 months before the award ceremony, I approached Gail Iverson, a venture capitalist known for funding startups that disrupted established industries. I presented my enhanced logistics framework along with a comprehensive business plan. "This could transform the entire sector," she said after reviewing my materials. "But why leave a secure position to start from scratch? Competition in this space is brutal." "Because I'm not starting from scratch," I replied, revealing my second presentation. Profiles of 7 industry veterans, including Tamsin and Leo, who had committed to joining my venture if it secured funding. Gail's expression changed. "Now that's interesting. And your former employer?" "Will likely continue taking credit for innovations they didn't create until they realize those innovations have stopped coming." 2 weeks later, I had a funding commitment. 1 month after that, I had office space leased under a holding company name and legal agreements with my future team members. I secured preliminary patents for my enhanced framework and reached out to clients who had expressed frustration with my current employer's inflexibility. Through careful networking, I identified 5 major clients who were considering moving their business elsewhere. I arranged discreet meetings, presented my solution, and secured tentative agreements contingent on my company's launch. Everything was in place. I just needed the right moment to make my move. The quarterly award ceremony provided the perfect opportunity. After learning that Ren would be receiving the Innovation Excellence Award for her logistics framework, I prepared my final act. I drafted resignation letters for myself and my 7 colleagues, finalized client transfer agreements, and prepared a press release announcing our new venture. That morning, I dressed with particular care, selecting a deep blue dress that projected confidence without ostentation. I arrived early, clutching my presentation folder, not because I expected to present, but because I wanted them to see me holding it one last time. I stood at the entrance of the grand conference hall, watching as colleagues filed in and found their assigned seats. I saw Dominic guiding Ren to a prime position near the executive table. I noticed Renata, the marketing director who had always treated operations staff as beneath her notice, checking the seating arrangements. When she spotted me, her expression shifted from surprise to irritation. That's when she spoke those words. "You can wait outside." As I stood there, absorbing the casual cruelty of her dismissal and Ren's smirking face, 3 years of accumulated slights crystallized into perfect clarity. I knew exactly what I needed to do. The moment I sent that email, containing our resignation letters, client transfer notifications, patent applications, and the press release scheduled for the following morning, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. As notification sounds chimed throughout the room, I walked away without looking back. I had only reached the parking garage when my phone began ringing. The CEO's name flashed on my screen. I declined the call. Then came texts from Dominic. Then Eliana from HR. I ignored them all. If you're still with me, thank you for your patience. The journey I've shared so far is one many of you might recognize. The frustration of having your contributions overlooked, your ideas stolen, your potential dismissed. If this resonates with you, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to hear stories of others who found their power in unexpected ways. Because what happened next wasn't just about revenge, it was about reclaiming what was rightfully mine while creating something even better. As I walked to my car, I felt my phone vibrating continuously in my pocket. I finally pulled it out to see 7 missed calls from the CEO, 3 from Dominic, and a flurry of increasingly desperate text messages. The most revealing came from Renata. "Whatever they're offering you, we'll double it. Come back inside now." That's when I knew they'd finally read what I sent. Comprehensive documentation of how my stolen algorithm had been fundamental to the company's recent success, along with proof that their version, the one they'd given Ren credit for, was merely a shadow of my complete innovation. I was unlocking my car when I heard rapid footsteps behind me. I turned to find Vincent, our vice president, breathing heavily after chasing me down 3 flights of stairs. "Brielle, wait," he gasped, his usually impeccable appearance now disheveled. "You can't just leave like this. The company needs you." I regarded him quietly. Interesting. An hour ago, I wasn't even worth a seat at the ceremony. "That was a misunderstanding," he said, straightening his tie. "A clerical error." Was it also a clerical error when my name was removed from the quarterly reports? Or when Ren presented my work as her own? Or when I was passed over for promotion 3 times while watching others advance using my innovations? Vincent's expression tightened. Business is complicated. Individual contributions often get absorbed into larger initiatives. "Yes, I've noticed whose contributions get absorbed and whose get celebrated," I replied, "but that's no longer my concern. The clients you've contacted are bound by exclusivity agreements. They can't simply switch to your startup." I smiled for the first time that day. "You might want to review those agreements again. The language restricts them from working with your competitors. But since my solution operates on an entirely different framework, one I developed independently, on my own time, it creates a new category. Your legal team confirmed this when they reviewed the original concept 6 months ago and determined it wasn't worth pursuing." Vincent's face paled. "What do you want, a promotion? Equity? Name it." What I wanted was recognition for my work, respect for my contributions, a seat at the table I helped build. I opened my car door. "But you've shown me something more valuable, that I don't need your table. I can build my own." As I drove away, I watched in my rearview mirror as more company executives poured into the parking garage, their awards ceremony completely forgotten. My phone continued buzzing with notifications. I pulled over briefly to silence it, but not before seeing a message from Tamsin. "It's done. We're all out. Meeting you at the new office." The new office was a converted industrial space I'd leased under a holding company name 3 weeks earlier. When I arrived, my team was already there. Tamsin, Leo, and 5 other colleagues who had suffered similar experiences at our former employer. Each had submitted their resignations simultaneously with mine, creating a talent exodus the company couldn't possibly recover from quickly. "Did they try to stop you?" asked Meredith, our operations specialist who had been repeatedly overlooked despite generating our former employer's most profitable client relationships. "Vincent chased me to the parking garage," I replied. "Offered me anything I wanted." "Bet that felt good," Leo said, handing me a cup of coffee from the machine we'd installed the previous weekend. "Not as good as this will," I said, opening my laptop to show them the response I'd received from our first major client. They had not only agreed to transfer their business to us, but had introduced us to 2 additional prospects impressed by our innovative approach. Over the next several hours, we finalized our launch strategy. Our company, Nexus Paradigm, would officially announce its existence the following morning, with our proprietary logistics framework as its flagship offering. The patents I'd filed would protect our intellectual property, and the client agreements we'd secured would give us immediate revenue. At 7:30 p.m., my phone rang with a number I didn't recognize. I almost ignored it until Tamsin glanced at the screen. "That's the board chairman's private line," she said quietly. I answered, putting it on speaker so my team could hear. "Ms. Novak," came the gravelly voice of Preston Fulton, the rarely seen chairman of my former company's board. "I believe we need to talk." "I'm listening," I replied. "I've spent the afternoon reviewing the situation. The documentation you provided is concerning. I'd like to meet with you privately to discuss a resolution." "I appreciate the offer, Mr. Fulton, but there's nothing to resolve. My decision is final." "Perhaps I haven't made myself clear." His tone hardened. "Our company has resources you cannot imagine. If you proceed with this venture of yours, we will be forced to take measures to protect our interests." "Are you threatening me?" I asked calmly. "I'm outlining consequences," he replied. "Legal action for breach of confidentiality, claims against your patents. We can ensure your startup never gets off the ground." I signaled to Leo, who began recording the call. "Mr. Fulton, everything I've done is legal and documented. The innovations I'm taking forward were created on my personal time, using my personal resources. Your own legal team confirmed they were distinct from company property. As for confidentiality, I've disclosed no proprietary information. I've simply informed clients that I'm starting a new business and invited them to consider our services." "Clients who are contractually obligated to us," he countered. "Clients whose contracts include performance clauses that you've repeatedly failed to meet." I didn't need to persuade them to leave. I simply offered them a better option when they were already looking elsewhere. The line went silent for a moment. "What would it take to bring you back?" he finally asked, his voice noticeably softer. "Name your terms." I looked around at my team, talented professionals who had been undervalued, overlooked, and exploited. People who had trusted me enough to take this leap together. "There are no terms, Mr. Fulton. This isn't a negotiation tactic. It's a new beginning." After ending the call, we spent hours preparing for the media response we anticipated following our announcement. By midnight, exhausted but exhilarated, we gathered around the conference table we'd assembled ourselves the previous weekend. "To Nexus Paradigm," Tamsin said, raising a paper cup of vending machine coffee, "and to Brielle, who showed us all what's possible when you refuse to stay where you're not valued. It's not just about me," I insisted. "Every person in this room made this possible. We're building something together that none of us could create alone." That night, I slept more peacefully than I had in years, despite the uncertainty ahead. The next morning, our press release went out at exactly 8 a.m., just as the trading day began. By 8:15, financial news sites were reporting on the sudden emergence of a disruptive new player in the logistics sector. By 9, they were reporting on the subsequent drop in my former employer's stock price. At 9:30, we gathered around a screen to watch our former CEO give an emergency press conference. His usual confidence was nowhere to be seen as he attempted to reassure investors that the departure of a few employees would not impact operations. The market disagreed. The stock dropped another 7% during his 17-minute speech. When he announced that Dominic would be stepping down to pursue other opportunities, I felt no satisfaction, only confirmation that the company would continue its pattern of scapegoating individuals rather than addressing its toxic culture. By noon, our phones were ringing constantly with calls from potential clients, investors, and even former colleagues interested in joining us. The industry had taken notice, and our calendar quickly filled with meetings. What my former employer had failed to understand was that true innovation doesn't come from titles or hierarchies. It comes from valuing the people who generate ideas. 1 week after our launch, as we prepared for a meeting with our largest new client, I received an email from Ren. The subject line read simply, "I didn't know." The message was brief. I was told the framework was collaborative, with your minor contributions already compensated. I never intended to take credit for your work. For what it's worth, I'm sorry. I started to type a response, then stopped. Her apology might have been sincere, but it changed nothing. She had been a symptom of the problem, not its cause. Instead of replying, I closed the email and focused on preparing for our client meeting. 3 months after our launch, Nexus Paradigm had secured contracts with 27 clients, including 3 of the largest shipping companies in the country. Our revolutionary approach to logistics optimization had reduced costs for our clients by an average of 31%, exceeding even my original projections. We had grown from 8 employees to 23, carefully selecting people who brought both skill and integrity to their roles. The true vindication came 6 months after the award ceremony that had changed everything. My former company announced a strategic restructuring that industry analysts recognized as a desperate attempt to remain competitive. Their stock had fallen 43% since our launch, and rumors of a potential buyout were circulating on financial news sites. I was reviewing our quarterly results when my assistant mentioned that Vincent, the former VP, was in our reception area asking to meet with me. "Did he have an appointment?" I asked. "No," she replied, "but he said it was important." I considered sending him away, but decided against it. Whatever he wanted, I was curious enough to hear it. When Vincent entered my office, the change in him was striking. The confident executive had been replaced by someone who looked as though he hadn't slept properly in weeks. "Thank you for seeing me," he said, remaining standing until I gestured toward a chair. "What can I do for you, Vincent?" He placed a folder on my desk. "This is a formal acquisition offer. The board wants to purchase Nexus Paradigm and integrate your technologies into our existing framework." I opened the folder, glanced at the figure on the first page, and closed it again. "That's a substantial offer," I acknowledged. "It reflects the value of what you've built," he replied, "and the cost of competing against you. Why are you the one delivering this? Where's the investment team?" Vincent shifted uncomfortably. "The board thought you might be more receptive if the approach came from someone you knew. Even though that someone told me I wasn't worth a seat at the table?" I never said. "You never had to say it. You showed it in every decision, every meeting invitation that never came, every time you let someone else take credit for work they didn't do." Vincent looked down at his hands. "The company has changed since you left. We've implemented new policies on innovation recognition, created mentorship programs, restructured compensation to reward original thinking. All things that could have been done before if anyone had cared enough to listen." "Yes," he admitted quietly. "That's why I'm really here. Not just for the acquisition offer, but to ask, would you consider returning as Chief Innovation Officer, reporting directly to the board?" I studied him for a moment, recognizing the desperation behind the offer. 6 months ago, such recognition would have meant everything to me. Now, it felt hollow. "I'm going to review your acquisition offer with my team and our advisors," I said carefully, "but I won't be returning as an employee under any circumstances. I've built something I believe in here, with people who value each other's contributions. That's not something I'm willing to compromise." After Vincent left, I sat alone in my office, reflecting on the journey that had brought me here. The pain of being overlooked had transformed into the power of creating something authentic. The colleagues who had once dismissed me were now approaching me as equals or seeking my approval. But the true victory wasn't in their recognition. It was in discovering that the table I had fought so hard to sit at wasn't worth a place at all. By building my own company, I had created not just a seat for myself, but a place where everyone's contributions were valued. The revenge I had planned had succeeded beyond my expectations, but its sweetest fruit wasn't watching my former employer struggle, it was watching my new company thrive. We weren't just profitable. We were creating a workplace where innovation flourished because people felt safe sharing their ideas. 6 months after that meeting with Vincent, we declined the acquisition offer and instead announced an international expansion. 1 year after the award ceremony, where I'd been told to wait outside, I was invited to give the keynote address at the industry's largest conference. As I walked onto that stage, I saw faces I recognized in the audience, including several from my former company. But this time, they weren't looking at me with dismissal or contempt. They were looking at me with something new: respect. I began my speech with the same words that had once been used to exclude me. "You can wait outside." A murmur ran through the audience. "Those words changed my life," I continued. "Not because they hurt, though they did, but because they finally showed me the truth, that I was waiting for recognition from people who would never give it freely, that I was measuring my worth by their standards rather than my own." The room fell silent as I shared my journey from overlooked analyst to industry innovator. I didn't name my former employer or colleagues. I didn't need to. The story wasn't about them anymore. It was about the power of knowing your own value, even when others fail to see it. I looked out at the faces watching me, some inspired, some uncomfortable, all attentive, and delivered my final thought. The most powerful seat isn't the one others save for you. It's the one you build yourself. Have you ever been in a situation where your contributions were overlooked or someone else took credit for your work? How did you handle it? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. And if this resonated with you, please like and subscribe to hear more stories about finding your power in unexpected places. Remember, sometimes being excluded from one table is the push you need to build something better, something that's entirely yours.